I go around watching, observing people, which rather, tends to make me bad company. When one goes out socially poor to invite out, bad bet. Ooh, well, but constantly you see invited because by those who haven't experienced the dreadful, thing that happened at the party. He was sitting in the corner, never said a thing all evening. Most strange. I thought it was a coon or something. Very odd. Never said a word. And I don't know what it was. He said something very strange to the woman he was sitting next to, the Countess of Bartan, I think it was. Anyway, and then things like that happen, you see, and one doesn't say anything, because bods come up and say things to you like, have you got, a proper job? Apart from what, this thing you do, this acting thing. A real job. No, but I think, for example, whereas an actor like Peter Ustinov is a natural raconteur at parties, he's very good anywhere, actually, as a conversationalist, generally. I tend more to sit back and watch other people. That's what's made me appear to, except when among my own intimate friends. Then, obviously, one opens up, and we swap ideas and things. But, so consequently, Peter Ustinov, one woman said to me, I have heard that you're funnier than Peter Ustinov. She's a very famous French socialite. I said, who told you? She said, this man here told me. And I said, first I've heard about it. He said, but you're funny. Tell her a funny story. You're not a man. Oh, la. So I said, I don't know any funny stories. She said, I refuse to believe that. Now, what are you going to do? You're standing there. I wouldn't think of going up to somebody and saying, I hear you're a very good accountant. He'd say, yes, that is quite right, yes. So, would you do me a column of figures? And no, I couldn't really, no. Come on, please, a quick one. Oh, well. What, running into 1,000, shall we say, or... I say, it's not for me, it's for my sister. She loves your figures. Oh, really? Yes, she collects all of them. She's seen all of your accounts. Oh, what was your favourite account? Oh, I don't know. I had one, you could take it on that sort of life. No, I don't practice it. Oh, God, no. I like to enjoy myself, But people, come round and it's natural. You're supposed to be a comic, supposed to be a humorist, supposed to be funny. And, they like to hear something. But it happens. It's got to happen, You can't come in the room and say, well, here we are, folks. Hello. Have you heard about the fellow who... So. Never... No, I like to sort of drift in and mingle and see who's there and, There's other people who come up to you, who are dying to meet somebody to insult them, you see. There's that sort. It's like poor old Sean Connery. Always gets people, hello, who is it? Coming up to him and going, Sean Connery, pow, you see, just because he's James Bond. It's because they've hit, I hit James Bond. I hit him, I really hit him. He hasn't done a thing, not a word. He hasn't said anything. Somebody on the phone. Doesn't matter.
I discovered that the only way out, the only way to exist, was to find the humorous side of the tragedy, of what made me miserable, whether it was Stan and Ollie or Chaplin. But I noticed that every time I saw them, they touched something in me that said there is another side to all of this. And I found that salvation out of myself in those great comedians, comics. The concept of a silent film stuck with me until one day I walked into the marriage company where I was employed at that time and said I'd like to do a silent film with Sellers.
That overused and abused word chemistry certainly existed with Blake Edwards and Peter Sellers. They sparked one another, and great scenes came out of it. Also, great differences of opinion. Unfortunately, the relationship between Blake and Peter deteriorated during the Shot in the Dark. And despite the fact that we were very anxious to make a third Pink Panther with the combination, at that time, they simply did not want to work with one another.
At one time I did say, I'll never make another film with him again, and that was Shot in the Dark.
At that particular time, Peter had left Hollywood, had done so under some very difficult circumstances.
I mean, he always finished up one of our films and saying, I'll never work with Blake Edwards again, or I'll never come back to Hollywood again.
It was mystifying and hurtful.
I think he secretly hated me for making him successful financially and critically a lot too, when he felt that, and justifiably so, when he felt that Strangelove and things like that were greater artistic achievements. And they were.
Blake hatched the idea of doing a film around a comedic character who is an uninvited guest at a Hollywood party.
It was important that we have a star for the film.
He began to think more of Peter Sellers and the kind of character he could create.
It was important that Peter Sellers, whom Blake had kind of designed the concept around, maybe be available to star in this.
To put up with Peter Sellers means literally to have the best of all possible times and the worst of all possible times. And I calculated when I wanted to do the party that it would be the best of all possible times. And I tested that by talking to him. And I felt I was right.
Why did they do it? I think it is sufficient to say that it was a great idea for both of them.
So it was worth a shot because he was a genius in his own way. And it was something that I had always wanted to do, and he had too. And I didn't have anything else to do at that time. I had made one film that kind of disappointed me, and I wanted to do better. There were a lot of reasons for it.
I think the careers of both of them illustrates the fact that they both realized what the other meant to his own talent. And they kept coming back to one another at various stages in their careers.
Everybody makes compromises. We're all hypocrites to some degree. And the ones that are closest to not being are my heroes. And that's gotten me in a lot of trouble.
The party is rather unique. Certainly among all the films I've ever been involved with, it has the shortest script of any that I have ever worked with. As a matter of fact, it is a script that runs some 63 pages, which of course tells you how much of this film was improvised.
We were doing an homage to the silent era, that Sellers was going to become one of his heroes, one of my heroes out of the silent. We were going to do it in color, which made it a little more update, but we were going to do it with subtitles, and all of it pantomime. After a day's shooting, he found he couldn't do it, and he had to be a character who spoke. And so we decided that the best thing to do, the closest we could come, would be to just have a format for the play, but make it up as we go along.
He said to me one day, I want to do a story where it's spontaneous. It's like the creativity of the actors all bringing something to it.
I had 3 or 4 lines in the original script that they showed me and from which I read, and I ended up with, I don't know how many lines, but it was a marvelous part when it's finished.
Well, I don't know if I really understood that it would be, in the main, improvised.
Although it was difficult and there was going to be a great deal of improvisation, we felt that it wasn't something that was going to get seriously out of hand. We didn't have the Titanic. We just had Peter and a group of people in a house.
We had a party, so it's one house, mainly one set. It has to be shot in continuity, so you know where you're going the next day, what you've done, what you've established. That's the most important thing.
The busiest person on the set was the script lady, who was writing all the time, or what did you say? Because it wasn't there.
We assembled the same key collaborators from the Panther pictures.
I turned it over to those people. I got the best people I could and said, here's my vision, contribute.
The idea originally was to find a house, rent it, and do the entire thing on a location in an actual standing house. As the picture developed, well, we realized that would create more difficulties than our building a set.
And this set was created on the stage that is partially a tank at Goldman because we wanted a pool surrounding the house. And there's an interesting scene in the house, of course, when Peter does come to the party, and he walks in the door and he begins to wash the mud of his shoe off in the water, loses his shoe, and the shoe begins to go through a series of water chutes.
The joke just grew and like a plant. One of the things that amazed me when I first went to work on the party was the relaxation and time that the two of them used to build a joke.
He wanted a character. When he said, how about Harundi Vivaci? I said, great, and that was that. And I loved his Indian character, and so did the Indians. It was so precise.
I've seen him do characterizations. He was better than almost anybody.
He loved his brilliance at being able to do voices. Of course, his whole career had begun that way. His character, as it appears in the party, very similar to the character he plays in The Millionaires.
Sellers wasn't unless he was some kind of an extreme character.
He was a compulsive impersonator. He needed to assume other characters for fun and entertainment, mostly for himself. If other people laughed, so much the better. But it was really for his own entertainment.
And in his real life, there was kind of no Sellers.
Birdie Num Nums, and we all were happy with Birdie Num Nums, which have become kind of like a byword for pet food.
Num num, num num, Birdie Num Num.
Blake had said to me, well, we need something for him to do as he wanders around the house. And I said, I got it. Give me a couple of days. And so I went to work with the prop department and designed that electronic panel where all the switches were. And I said to Jim Songer, build me the panel, but I want an oscilloscope above it. So when he talks into the intercom microphone, the oscilloscope moves around.
You're waiting for the character to stop acting like an ass, and perhaps he's going to finally get to accomplish what he wanted to do.
I wanted to be so abrasive and so genuinely decent and not wanting to hurt anybody, because we all have a little bit of that in us. We all say, why did I say that, or why did I do that?
That's all part of trying to keep the audience off balance. And hopefully keep them laughing while that's going on.
Denny Miller, great guy, wonderful basketball player at UCLA. And my friend John Wooden, the UCLA basketball coach, our family's friend, often spoke very highly of Denny and from a family of athletes. And he did so well as Tarzan. He was a good Tarzan.
Big, strong, had a funny sense of humor. Seemed perfect for Wyoming Bill Kelso.
I mean, he was just bigger than life to himself. I crush his hand every time I shake it. That led to one of the funniest sequences in the whole damn thing, where he sticks his hand in the caviar. Blake took from the actors and took it beyond where they ever thought it would go.
I just loved him. I didn't have to tell him to do anything. Really, just go here, go there, and be drunk. Take another drink. Go over and make love to her at the, and what he'd come up with. Well, the best drunk in films or anyplace else. Pretend drunk.
Blake just encouraged this kind of creative improvisation.
And Steve gave it a beautiful progression with a duck walk. That duck walk of his flat feet going across the floor. And of course he gets so smashed that when he comes to the water, he doesn't get on the stepping stones to cross the water. He just dives right in and slop, slop, slop through 2 feet of water up to his knees.
Sometimes new things would come up, and I'd say, "We'll get an elephant." And I remember one morning coming in a little hungover, I guess, and I was sitting at a table talking to somebody about what we were going to shoot, having some coffee. And around the corner came this baby elephant's trunk and sort of felt me up to see what I was, and then peeked around the corner. Boy, I'm glad I wasn't drunk, because I really would be having DTs.
He was cute. Cute little elephant.
We had a wonderful elderly man who was kind of the janitor, the cleanup person. And he had to go around and clean up elephant poop, even though it was baby elephant poop. There were tons of it, and he'd have to get in there with a shovel. We had a band on this set all the time. And every time he'd come out to shovel up the poop, they'd play "There's No Business Like Show Business." And that's kind of the atmosphere that we worked under.
In order to have the soap suds, we had to find some source. And at that particular time, when you needed a scene like that with soap suds on water, you got a hold of the rescue department at LAX airport. And you got them in their off hours to bring in their foam truck.
And they produced an immense amount of foam.
And Dick Crockett, Blake's longtime friend, a wonderful guy, one of the top stuntmen in Hollywood, looked at the pool, and I was standing there, and suddenly he said, "Hey, everybody, it's throw Ken in the pool day, throw the producer in the pool." And the next thing I knew, Dick was catapulting me through the air with another guy on the other side, through the air, out 20 feet away, and I dropped into the center of the pool and broke the suds open and went on down. And I thought, well, this is kind of fun. It's nice to have them want to throw the producer in the pool. Why not? And when I came up to the top, and no air, because the suds are used at the airport to stifle oxygen.
And another thing was that it was almost impossible to breathe. You were in a giant soap suds.
And I thought, this is weird. And all I could do was look up. And if you look through bubbles and they're bursting, there's kind of sparkling, and you could see the stage lights from the catwalk, and I could hear voices in the distance through the foam. And all I could do is try and tread water, but no air.
In that foam, you can't see anything.
I thought, I'll just start swimming towards something. And I swam to my right, and luckily I picked one of the shorter routes to the edge. And as I passed out, my fingernails went ping, and someone said, "I think he's over here." And they pulled me out just before I was becoming unconscious.
I've never been to a party, as I say, like the one that's depicted in this picture.
On one of the scenes, the one where the swinging door opens and you can see the waiter and the head waiter, he's choking him. Came to the end of where everybody thought we were going to stop, and there was no voice from Blake Edwards to cut. And he was on the floor laughing so hard that he couldn't say cut.
They didn't resurrect me for a few hours.
You know something extraordinary is happening when the actors and actresses who are not involved in the scene are there on the set watching. That's when you realize that something extraordinary is going on. And it was 12 weeks of that.
And so they went along with it, God bless them. And we had a party.
When you have a party, my mom always said, "Ken, leave the party when you're having a good time, and you'll always have a good time."
Ken Wales had been with me for a long time, and I met Ken when I did a film called Experiment in Terror, played an FBI agent. We hit it off. He was a very bright young man.
Blake used to like to throw me these challenges and see how long it would take me to come up with something. He said, "What I want is to be able to shoot the film, develop it, print it, and look at it in a projector in 5 minutes." And I said, "Well, you know, the difficult I can do right away. The impossible takes just a little bit longer." So I began to think about this. Of course, the obvious way was to try to do something with videotape.
Jerry Lewis was certainly one of the very first people to use video assist, but it wasn't video assist where the video camera was integrated into the film camera, as I understand it. It was a video camera sitting next to the film camera.
He set the video camera on a tripod several feet away, and of course it had big parallax. But Jerry Lewis is often credited with kind of starting all this.
That's where I saw it. But it wasn't just Jerry Lewis having a video camera on the set. I mean, that was the most elaborate, ridiculous thing I'd ever seen. I knew it had a place.
I was prowling around in the sound department at Samuel Goldwyn Studios, which was headed by Gordon Sawyer. And I said, Gordon, I wonder if we could ever do this. And he said, well, right here on the lot, there's a young guy in my sound department that's created a system that is kind of like that. Maybe you guys could work together. Let me have you meet him. And that's when he introduced me to Jim Songer.
Well, Gordon Sawyer was the head of the engineering department at the Samuel Goldwyn Studios in Hollywood. Mr. Sawyer realized that the new directors would all be mostly television producers and directors. And television producers and directors at that time were used to directing with a TV monitor because they were shooting with live television cameras. So Gordon thought that it would be a good business venture for the studio to have someone that would possibly build a video referencing system so that they could have an instant playback or an instant direct view of what the camera is shooting. We started shooting commercials for Mr. Stan Freberg using video reference without a tape recording device. At the same time, I was working with Ampex on the first videotape recorder that hadn't been released yet, but was about to be released. And at that point, we were able to not only capture images, but then replay them. Ken Wells came to the sound department, and where I had my video equipment set up, and he physically saw it. And he said, Jimmy, he said, I work for Blake Edwards, and I'd like for you to meet Mr. Edwards. And I was excited about that because that meant the first feature film.
It was Blake's idea that we do it. He was a great fan of the idea once he knew about it, and just felt that it would be of immeasurable help to him.
The first system was based on us getting, if you will, close enough to the camera people to actually affix a foreign object to their camera.
On the party, it was the first time we'd used it. We took a television camera and put it on the side of the film camera so that at the same time we were shooting on film, we were recording on tape. Now, we didn't have exactly what we were recording on film, but we had exact continuity. And that's what we were after, not how good was the shot.
Of course, the obvious thing was you just set up a camera next to the actual motion picture camera. But the problem with that is you're never going to get the exact picture of what the film is seeing in that film frame on the videotape.
We were just astonished because he knew more about what the camera was capable of than we did. We just physically mounted it and made it operate, but Blake knew how to use it as a tool.
And it's bound to save you money because you've got a record too, if nothing else. And you can look at it and say, well, wait a minute. If somebody comes over and says, listen, the costume, and nobody else saw it, and you say, let's run it. By God, there was something in there that you would have seen in rushes, and you would have had to either go back and reshoot or leave it.
And if something is wrong, having to restage the previous day's shooting and shooting it over, those expenses are overwhelming.
So the idea that you could really see what you're doing, I think, has been the wish of filmmakers for years before they could do that.
The Party was a unique film in the fact that it was an ad-lib type comedy thing. Everything was spontaneous. And that was ideal for video assist, but it was very tasking for it. At the time, I didn't realize that.
And when we began to shoot and brought Peter Sellers in, we didn't tell Peter that this was going to happen. But we had him do the first scene, and then Blake said, I want to show you something. He stood him back and said, okay, roll it. Look there. And when Peter looked at the monitor, here was the scene he had just done on film. And when it was over, he said, my. Let me see it again. And then he said afterwards, let me see it again. Let me see it again. And Blake and I realized we were in a little bit of trouble because he looked at it for about an hour.
When we would finish a sequence or get a print, Peter would dash over to the monitor.
Mr. Sellers was very adamant about making something work the way he felt that it should work, and Mr. Edwards had the same feeling.
It adds more time, more talking over, more things to disagree about, and disagreements that occur while the crew is standing around.
The thing that really caught my attention at that point was the collaboration between the two of them arguing over a small picture that they had just looked at. And it was a positive argument. It wasn't a negative argument. They were arguing as to how to possibly change the timing to make it a little bit more thrust into that scene or that cut. And with the video monitor, they were able to work it out between them and to get the most out of it.
If we heard laughter, we would know as a cast that we would go on from that point. If we didn't hear any laughter, then we'd know that we would do almost the same thing, or at least in the same area, but we would make some changes.
If Mr. Edwards had an actor or an actress and something wasn't correct, he would immediately take the actor or actress off and we'd have a playback on the video monitor. And here's what you did, here's the way I want you to do it. And they'd go back, and every time they would get it right.
After we shot it, we would all go back and take a look at what was on tape, knowing that it was not precisely what we had in the camera.
And Mr. Edwards was telling me he had several shots the next day with a lot of extras that were going to be in the shot, and he had to know who was on or off the camera. So he wanted to be able to see it in video. I told him there was no way we could do that at the time. Fortunately, there was another attachment on the old film cameras, but it was right on the very front of the camera, right over the objective lens.
Instead of having the camera mounted, the television camera mounted on the side of the reflex, we put it aimed down into a mirror.
And through adjustment of the zoom lens on the camera and the mirror tilt, you were able to approximate the image that was going into the film camera.
Which would eliminate all the horizontal parallax, which would eliminate the problem of people being off camera on the left or right side.
But it wasn't still through the lens at this particular stage.
And so we formed a company, and we went to Panavision, and we got one of their doors, their Panavision doors, and we, in our company, developed the first internal camera.
He said, Jimmy, he said, I've talked to Panavision, and Panavision says that they will supply you anything you need.
And sure enough, the end result of it was that we were able to present literally a modified Panavision camera that had the video camera built inside the cavity of the door.
We had a camera that was capable of then seeing a television image through the lens, identical to what was being exposed on the negative, and displayed in its motion picture display aspect ratio exactly the way you'd see it in the theater, only a smaller picture.
Video West did very well. Ralph Nelson, who did Lilies of the Field and Tick, Tick, Tick and many other good films, was a great advocate of the process. He wouldn't make a film without it. We built a special unit for him and then began to rent it to different companies.
But our camera was in such demand, and there was not another camera available anywhere in the world. No other camera, period, was available. And pictures were being held up, production, until the picture that we were shooting on actually finished. And we wrapped the equipment, my crew and myself, on a finishing production, loading it, getting it on an airplane, and flying it to the next location or the next studio to be unboxed for the next day's shooting of a new startup picture.
And I thought, I've really got something that's going to be very important to the industry. And I tried to get people through Panavision sometimes, people I knew, even Gower Champion, my close friend, wouldn't use it because they thought it was going to, like so many innovative things, corrupt the actor. You know, it was taking away from something.
there was a tremendous amount of engineering and a tremendous amount of expenditure on Mr. Edwards' side. He's paid a lot of money. That equipment was not cheap at that time.
This was something that he did. That's where the money came from. We're very grateful that he did that. But it was going to be tough to try to do this without huge capital infusion, without a major, major company. And if we were going to make films as creative filmmakers, this was a tough duality.
I just knew that it was too much for me. And I said, give it back to Panavision.
And when we handed it over, it was a gift to Panavision and a gift to the industry. And we didn't ask a penny, and Blake didn't either. I'll bet that he wishes he maybe had made another decision about giving it to them.
Oh, I still have to borrow for my rent, but what the...
Everybody said, no, that'll never be used. It's a nice idea, but that'll never be used.
And there was a time when people said, well, we have been making it without it. We won't need it.
The late 70s, a video tap was not a common thing on a film camera.
And I think it wasn't used until almost a video orientation of the newer and younger filmmakers like Coppola said, why wouldn't you want to use it? Why would you want to make a film without it?
This is where I came in, where I was introduced to Francis as I was part of a video crew that was documenting Mickey Hart and some of the Grateful Dead and some other musicians doing a percussion soundtrack to Apocalypse Now. In the process of this, Francis came in and saw what we were doing, saw what was happening in the truck. I showed him how to work the switcher. He sat down and said, this is great. I can see what the cameramen are shooting. I can see it here live, and I can talk to them on headphones. And he said, well, and he started directing, and he started switching, and he started mixing, and he said, wow, this is great. This is how movies will be made in the future. And so we talked and had a great rapport, and we went on to develop what became his electronic cinema. Having evolved from designing Francis Coppola's electronic cinema and the Silverfish, it evolved into this, and this is what I've been doing for the last 25 years. This is a current age generation of what Video Assist is for the after the year 2000. Pretty much consists of a digital disc recorder. We're no longer recording on tape. We're now recording on a hard disk. Has a routing switcher for routing video around in and out to all of the various switchers and monitors you would have on a set. Obviously has monitoring, has a video switcher up here for doing dissolves and effects, has a video printer for doing printouts. I can basically have playback to the director before he yells, he'll yell cut, and I'll have playback before he can yell playback. Now you don't go on a set. You don't go on a location where Video Assist is not a very important tool.
The electronic world has indeed changed the way films are made, conceived, shot, and delivered.
Video Assist has changed the type of stories that people can tell in many ways because it gives the director an ability to mix a lot of elements together that he couldn't really see together before on the set.